Dick.
Here.
Ellen.
Here.
Andy. Janet. Brian.
Here.
Bill.
Here.
Lynn.
Here.
And I am here. So can I get an approval to move the agenda? Motion by Dick, second by
Sure.
Ellen. Any opposition to the agenda?
Well, should we be approving the minutes of the last meeting of the members?
Not on the agenda.
Okay, well, that's
I guess that gets
what
done.
I'm asking.
That gets done. I think that gets done
In May.
In May.
Well, typically, we don't have another meeting of members.
I
so
think
just-
when we did
We
it
did
last year.
not prepare minutes.
Okay, that's what I figured.
I think that just gets done in May.
Okay.
So there'll be 2 sets in May. Okay. Any objections? Agenda is approved. So we have resolution appointing Lynn Egan of Town Center to the Board of Directors, whereas the following person, effective November 9th, 2022, is the Columbia Council representative appointed by the Board of Directors of the Town Center Community Association, Lynn Egan, pursuant to the terms of the Columbia Association Charter and bylaws, and such Columbia Council representative is a member of the corporation. Now therefore be resolved that the members hereby elect the Board of Directors effective November 28th, 2022, Linda Egan, the newly appointed Columbia Council representative from Town Center. Any discussion? I will call the question. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Ginny moves, Alan seconds. Approval of the resolution. I will call the roll. Ginny?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The motion carries 8-0. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And second by Dick. Any objections to adjourning?
Do that again for the next.
Meeting is so adjourned. Welcome to the board, Lynn.
Does this go into the Guinness Book of World Records as the fastest
I was,
members meeting?
so I'll take 10 minutes for the BSC to let
Lynn signed
Lynn
her,
sign for documents. Great umbrella. I'll be right back. Call this meeting of the Board Operations Committee to order at 7:03 p.m. I will now call the roll. Eleni?
Here.
Jenny?
Here.
Bill?
Here.
Brian?
Here.
And I'm here. This BOC meeting is being recorded, but it's not being live streamed. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
One second.
Jenny moves.
Bill second, I think.
Brian second. Jenny moves. Brian seconds. Any objections to the agenda? The agenda is moved. I don't believe we have any resident speak out. So next we have number 4, the approval of the August 29th BOC minutes by consent. First on the agenda is the December 8th BOD meeting.
Yeah, have a couple of suggestions here. Some are mine, some are Brian's, some are Andy's. I think, Eric, you had some. So I just try to put them in someplace on one of these agendas. Now, I didn't get them all on, so you know what you wanted. If it's not there, it's up to you to say something. But I'd also, when I say where I put some of these items, I'd like you to explain it more, why it's important, all right? Okay.
Okay.
Under consent agenda, I'd like to add a vote on the senior committee's preference to change its names. They've spent months doing that, and what they want to change to is the Aging Well in Columbia Advocacy Committee. And I believe the staff liaison for CA submitted it to CA, and they would love to have it approved quickly. So I sent it all to you. I sent Sharon Vogel's email to you, and if you had any questions, you have any concerns, otherwise, I'd like to add that to the consent agenda for December 8th.
Okay, get a second on that motion.
I'll second it.
Brian seconds. Any comments?
I just have a question. Does changing its name to Advocacy Committee change its role? I mean, it's a board advisory committee.
They understand that very well, but they're trying to, they come through CA. The CA liaison is there every time. So they're very respectful of the fact that they are advisory to CA, the staff and the board. So they just don't go out on their own. Good question. But what they're trying to do is they feel senior advisory committee is kind of laid back and passive, and they're trying to show that, they circulate other activities that CA is doing to people, to the what the Howard County Parks and Rec is doing, other organizations. They want to keep people active and involved for both physical reasons and mental health reasons. So they feel senior advisory committee kind of laid back.
So the committee, I assume the committee took a vote to approve that name.
Oh, yeah. They had months of different names. They had a thorough process. I'm the liaison. I was there at every meeting. And they came up and they voted on it. And they got input from people. So they did a very thorough process. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what, Sharon Lee Vogel's thing is about.
Andy?
I have the same concern that Alan has, the change from advisory to advocacy, because those are two very distinct terms. All our other committees are advisory in essence. And I'm just not sure. I'm not sure whether we've thought through the whole idea of, do we want to turn our advisory committees into advocacy committees? Because this may start a trend.
Bill?
I hear what everybody else is saying, but I thought that we were here to just say, should we put this on the agenda so that the full board could have this discussion?
So the issue here is, it's on, currently, the motion calls for it to be on the consent agenda.
Right.
So if we want to have this discussion, I would move it from the consent agenda to the board votes agenda.
I would suggest we move it to the board vote agenda, because I think we're going to have to discuss it.
Sure.
So can I get an amendment to move this to the board votes agenda?
Well, I'll just agree to that, okay?
Okay, so Gina agrees to it?
Move it down, add 5 minutes.
My first board ops meeting, so
What?
forgive me.
I'm sorry, what?
It's my first board
fine.
ops committee meeting, so forgive me on this. Have we already established that everything that we had tabled or needed to continue discussion from our prior meeting is already on this agenda here?
No, we need to make sure that any previous things that you want to see on the agenda need to be on the agenda. So if there's something that got tabled in a previous meeting that you want to make sure is on this meeting, you need to make sure that it's on the agenda. And if it's not, you should make a motion to.
Well, Bill may not
Before
understand.
we add any other items, I just want to make sure that we take care of that.
Well,
If we only have 15 minutes left on this agenda.
Bill may not understand that we didn't create the agenda.
Like,
We got the agenda. We're creating it now.
Right, so I think
Okay.
first order would be if there's anything that was tabled or continued, that should be the first order we talk about before we add anything new.
Okay.
Well,
That's my point here.
Nikki?
Since it's your first meeting, I was just going to clarify the way they're put together. As you can see, there's not a full agenda. What staff puts on this topics for inclusion, based on the guidance we've gotten previously from the chair and vice chair, is only items that are required due to board governance, or, so for instance, the quarterly reporting, that kind of thing. Or you'll also see items related to the budget, because that was an improved schedule by the board earlier this year. And then lastly, there are a couple of recommendations, for instance, from the audit committee. So this list, this long list,
Right.
is everything that the board has said it would be interested in talking about at some point. I would suggest, based on the board operations committees we've done, and I've seen different formats run differently, it's often helpful, which I think is kind of what you were indicating, to recognize the time that we have noted as staff. If you were to take all the governance topics, how much time is left, and that's based on the 3-hour time limit that's in our bylaws. So right now, the December 8th meeting only has 15 minutes, and that is because it's already chock full of budget and financial reporting. So I would strongly suggest new topics go into January or February. What you'll note at the very bottom is potential topics for discussion. The only reason those are specifically listed there on December 8th is that in previous meetings, and you'll see the dates noted or who suggested it, that was conceptually said, oh, we could talk about that in December. But that was not added to the agenda because those items need more time than staff would recommend. They need more time than 15 minutes.
okay.
Dick?
And one other thing is, it's not only the things that are on the agenda, but the time's allotted. So as your committee, you will be able to maybe manipulate some of those times.
Understood. I just want to make sure we weren't, because this is our first meeting we're talking about from the previous board ops committee. I didn't want anything to drop that we already had in play.
Well,
Obviously, the agendas that we'll talk about subsequent, there's more room, but I just want to make
And
sure.
sometimes what happens is you get through a couple of agendas and you realize, well, based on the way things worked out, oh, we need to add something back in the agenda or move things around. That's,
So-
there can be a bit of juggling that
My
happens.
point of information, there's nothing that we need to carry that any committee member is aware of from our last meeting, is that correct? It's already either on the agenda or we put that topic to bed from our previous meeting?
I believe the
Well-
one thing that is outstanding are some of the ethics policies, but I don't think there's room on the December 8th agenda for adding that.
Okay.
Dick?
I'm not on the committee, but I'd just like to mention that I don't see much in here about the budget between now and February. And one of the things that was discussed at, I believe, the last meeting was the possibility of adding some $400,000 worth of contributions. And I wouldn't want to have to confront Susan with that in February. I think we need to go, if we're going to do that, we need to have some time up front to,
That would come under the
I
discussion.
do want to address, I'll address that now. So under board votes for December 8th, there's the draft capital allocation and fixed changeable expenses.
Right.
I believe that line item, and correct me if I'm wrong,
That's correct. That's what it's for, to discuss the budget.
I wasn't even finished my statement yet, but I believe that line item would encompass votes such as the preliminary vote to raise the cap and any votes on grant requests. So that would be
Good.
1 and 2, and that should be incorporated under that particular vote section.
And there's a third. I was adding a vote on annual cap
Yeah.
and annual charge,
Yeah,
but
that's-
specifically spelling that out on this agenda so that,
Yeah, that's what I said, annual rate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Rate and cap and the 2 grant requests. So it's the 1 and 2 that would be part of.
It
Yeah.
also needs to note, if you're going to read what's at the bottom, it's not noted that we'll need to vote on the capital budget dollar amount.
Yeah, we would need that also on.
Well, I mean, we thought it was captured by saying draft capital allocation and fixed changeable expenses, but if you want it called out, we can do it that way.
That, I think having it called out will make my life easier.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I think these are all very important things to get onto this agenda, but we're a little bit far away from the motion that was originally put out but not voted on. And I play a part in that, so
Understood.
I just want to make sure we get back to that, and then maybe we can make motions on these other items.
Yeah, understood. So we do have a motion to add 5 minutes.
Yeah.
5 minutes to change the name of the senior committee.
from, to the Aging Well and Columbia Advocacy Committee.
Okay.
And that would be 5 minutes under board votes.
I'll call a question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
What was the vote?
All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. I could just add a few more things and then you can debate it or whatever. Under board discussion, after dashboard, we were told that we would have a position or a paper on CA voting in village elections. So I put that on the, for 10 minutes. I don't think it should take more than that. If all the villages were contacting you, we're just going to get the feedback and see what we think. And that's only board discussion. It would be for a vote the following month.
Likey?
And then the other thing.
Wait.
Oh.
Likey?
Staff would not be prepared to post that on Friday. We just reached out to the villages and are scheduling that meeting, just like we indicated.
I thought Wes said it could be done by the 8th.
No, he did not.
So what is your proposed timeline?
I would say at least January, we're scheduling the meeting. We reached out to the village managers, which is what he indicated. He did not commit to a date because what he said in the meeting was he has to schedule it with the villages. So we couldn't commit to a date until we scheduled it with the villages.
So you have not scheduled anything with the villages yet?
I do not know. I know he is in process of that.
So what's been provided to the villages regarding this topic?
Has he developed a proposal?
I do not know. I am not handling the process. I'm telling you that staff will not be ready on December 8th. We would have to post it this Friday. We will not have that materials prepared.
Okay.
Can we
Actually,
find out from him if he even developed a proposal?
so I'll put it this way. If this is just for board discussion on the 8th, there's no further meeting in December. So it would have to get voted on anyway at the January meeting. So we could probably just move those to the January meeting.
Move it for a,
Move the, move
for
the-
board discussion and a board vote?
yeah, for the 2 January meetings.
Okay, whoops, that's February.
So we can bring that up when we discuss the January agendas.
January, well, we don't vote on January 12th, so it would be January 12th.
Well, you have a discussion and then,
Right, right.
okay, any further?
That would also be 10 minutes, right?
Excuse me.
Sure.
Yeah. I believe the date for the hearing on the bill, I think it's 73, and all of the Howard County bills is the first week in December.
I know Bill 1023 is the first week in December. That's the BOE bill. I'm not sure about is 723 also the same date?
I believe.
The 14th is everything, and if they,
I
yeah.
believe so. So
They may have the
if
15th.
the board is not going to take a position until January, board members should know that if they present testimony, they present testimony as individuals.
So I will actually, I'll raise that question then. Can I get a motion to add votes on both bills 723 and 723, right? 723 and 1023.
and also the districting bill? Three of them, three bills.
Yeah.
Two,
Those of us who are numerically challenged, did we get 2 words on the topic of each of these?
I had it listed actually under pre-filed state and county legislation for December 8th.
We would need to take a vote on it.
Yeah, you're right. So it would be the Board of Education districting bill, changing that. Is everybody familiar with that? You're getting enough? Okay. That would be one, and that would be then under board votes, right? Move it up from where I had it to board votes. But we do want to get some input from the general counsel on, was he going to discuss this with us? Does he see this as an interest, bill that he would have discussed or what? And the other one is, I think it's 1023, Jen Teresa's bill, and then 723, which is, there's two bills. One on strictly Columbia Association and disclosure of finances, campaign funding, et cetera. And the other one is what we referred to as HOA legislation. They're talking about a pilot for just Howard County with getting grants to a particular project to deal with issues that the residents that live in that HO can't afford, like repairing private roads. And that was a bill last year that was sponsored by Delegate Holmes from Prince George's County in the state legislature, and there's a workforce working on it over the summer, and Jen is putting that bill in. So there's three bills that,
What's the third bill? Number of the third bill?
I think one is 7-23 and the other is 1023.
Yeah, I got those two. So 720, so point of information, 723 is the Jen Ross's bill on financing CA elections. And 1023 is the county bill that changes the way we vote for Board of Education candidates.
That's 1023?
That's 1023.
Oh,
So those
but
are
that's not Jen's, right?
no.
Okay.
Terrasa's bill is
Is
723.
there a motion?
So
surrounding all
the
this?
question, so what I'm asking for is a motion to add the two bills to board votes to discuss, to vote on taking a stand for CA to take, for the CA board to take a stand on both bills.
And the time?
So right now we got 10 minutes left, so that would probably be 5 minutes each. Andy?
If we're going to do those bills, can we also consider supporting the Howard County Veterans Monument request, which is being submitted, and the Long Ridge Village Center Shared Kitchen request?
Those are county bills?
They're listed as legislative bond initiatives.
That's not the same thing.
Oh, because it's under the same thing as the legislative.
So this is in preparation for the delegation meeting? So the state delegation meeting on the 14th?
Yeah, it just says 2023 proposed local legislation.
So
And that's where I noticed that.
I guess the question I have is when is testimony
I don't know.
for the bills?
Shari, do you know when? the
yeah,
bond
hang
bills
on.
will be?
Typically the third Monday of the month, but I don't know about this particular.
Yeah,
Well, this would be the delegation, right?
because if it's something that's not time.
This is the delegation.
This is the delegation,
I thought that was a county.
This
which
is
is the
2023
14th.
proposed local
14th,
legislation
and
for
they may have
state
one on the
delegation.
15th if there's a carryover.
I mean, do they discuss those types of things at? the-
Depends on what's on the agenda. Sometimes they break it up. I don't know if that's on the agenda or not.
It's under it.
But I think the other problem is, there's probably, I think there's about 20 requests for money.
Oh, yeah.
So we would want to only consider 2 of them.
To that,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Without looking at all of them?
Yeah, it's on there as a bond initiative. I'm not sure.
You do have time in January and
Okay.
February to do that, because they get a certain amount of the pie from the state, and they then divide it up, take it more seriously. Right now, I forget what the total is, but it's a lot,
Okay, so.
and they're not going to get all that money.
So can I get a motion to add presenting a board position on Bill 723 and presenting a board for 5 minutes and presenting a board position on Bill 1023 to the agenda? Got a
So
motion
moved.
by Ginny. Anyone second it? Any seconds? Seconds. Okay.
What about the Board of Education bill on districting? Does anybody want to deal with
Hope
that
somebody
one?
seconds it. Sounds like those are important things with a time limit.
What?
Sounds like those are important things with a time limit, so somebody seconds that.
Well, I didn't hear anybody second it, so.
We just don't have time.
We do have time. We got 10 minutes.
So you believe that we should have a robust discussion amongst board members for 5 minutes on a bill about redistricting or how Board of Education members are elected in this county? We'll discuss that robustly for 5 minutes, come to a consensus, and vote on that.
Is there already time on the agenda for this?
It seems like it's at least a half an hour you want to have a discussion on this. This is a serious topic.
I mean, it is a serious topic, but it's time critical. There's no, you can't, December 8th is the last time we can actually discuss it.
Right.
Because the testimony is the 14th. So,
And I would go with Sherry's suggestion that individual members testify with respect to both of these bills, and provided the time and attention that we can give it to it. To just say we're going to discuss it for 5 minutes really doesn't show much input from the board, does it? Or much thought, really. I just asked the question. Please tell me how we do it.
Well, I think it depends on how much disagreement there is. Hopefully, I assume, we all care about Columbia, we've all been thinking about this, so there's lots of board thought already. Could be we find we have consensus and it's real easy to do. If we hit the time limit and we haven't come to agreement and we can't agree to extend the time, then the discussion dies.
That's a good point.
Good question. With the times that we've got already carved in stone here, or are they carved in
they're
stone?
not carved in stone.
Can we change these other times?
Yeah, we
to
can
give
change
more-
the times.
Because I think, to answer what Bill says, I totally agree. This is a really complicated discussion, and I think maybe we should get some time for somewhere else to make it a bit more robust.
I mean, right now we have the second quarter financials has 30 minutes and the dashboard has an extra 20 minutes. You might be able to carve 10 minutes out of that.
I had actually changed the dashboard to 15. Maybe we could even change it to 10, because the discussion usually doesn't go on that long.
Nikki?
So I will say, which I have said at every board operations committee, the single greatest responsibility of the board of directors is financial oversight. So the priority on the quarterly reporting, the financial reports, and actually digging into those, reviewing them, and having robust discussion along with the budget process, I would strongly advise against reducing the time on that.
Do you know how much time it actually takes in the last 4 board meetings on this subject? Do we have any idea? Well, okay.
I don't think we got stats on it.
Rhetorical question, okay.
But given that there's no second on the motion, I don't think it's going to pass anyway.
Okay,
So we still have 10 minutes on the December 8th agenda. Is there any other additions that anyone wants to propose for December 8th?
yeah, Brian had well, actually,
Yeah.
I had a suggestion for adding 10 minutes. I'm sorry, I already did that, and we can't do it. CA votes in village elections, okay. Lake Elkhorn, you had some
Yeah, so-
suggestions, and that I put in there for,
It was
20 minutes.
suggested last time, it's down with the potential topics.
15 minutes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think 10 minutes,
Well,
not very much, but I think at least that we should start.
Okay, so do you want to make a motion to add 10 minutes to discuss the
Well-
Lake Elkhorn stream restoration? And suggest that,
So you put the motion, I'm seconding it?
no, I'm asking if you want to make a
Okay.
motion.
Yes.
Maybe I have a second on that. Give me a second. So we got a motion by Brian, second by Jenny to add 10 minutes for the Lake Elkhorn stream restoration. Any discussion on it?
Could we narrow the topic here and be a little bit more specific? Because this is a very large discussion. If we're going to spend 10 minutes on it, I want it to be a good 10 minutes. We need to focus what our attention will be on, please. If we could figure out what that is.
Brian, do you have a particular focus?
Yeah, I think one of the things we should focus on is a more detailed look into updating the Columbia Stormwater Management Plan. And I think that fits in with the discussion on the Lake Elkhorn stream. So I think it's important that that be brought up and maybe moving towards having that plan updated. So I'd like to discuss that.
Is that something that can be done in 10 minutes? It sounds like updating a whole plan
But
is
I had 15 minutes on,
15 minutes. Is that something that can be done in that time frame?
Yeah, but the other thing is, of course, there could be more discussion, but we're still waiting for the answers to the questions that we put forward last time. We've still got like 18 or 19 questions. So I think that's another area that's important.
Okay, so I guess my question is, for 10 minutes, what would you want to focus on for Lake Elkhorn?
I really want to focus on the management plan.
Okay.
The fact that we got an open space report back in 2017 that suggests a timeline for updating the stormwater management plan, and I think it's important we should discuss how that goes forward.
Okay. Andy?
It might be better to label this as updating stormwater management plan, so that the public doesn't get the impression that we're going to have this large discussion over the Lake Elkhorn plan again.
Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. We'll consider that a friendly amendment too. So we got a motion to add 10 minutes for the stormwater.
15, I think.
10 is all we have left on the.
Well, it's okay.
We got a motion for 10 minutes for the stormwater management plan.
Update on,
So I'd like to clarify, and I did this last time, and I know Alan in particular at a meeting when I indicated that it was discussed at BOC, and so staff had not prepared information. Alan indicated that he was not at BOC and didn't agree with that. So I would like to understand that when we discuss in BOC, so you're saying update stormwater management plan. You've asked about that, and we've answered that it's not in the budget this year, so we're not going to undertake that right now. So in terms of what 10 minutes would do, is that board discussion talking about what you'd like to see if you allocate money in the next fiscal year for a stormwater management update plan? Meaning there's nothing for staff to prepare if we don't have it in our planned budget schedule to update that plan this year.
Well, if it's something that's going to require updating the budget, we're putting in budget requests in any case at the same time. So if it's something for the 2024 budget, then that's part of the discussion as well.
I think what Brian's saying is, what would it cost to update the stormwater management plan? And so if it's a reasonable sum, we can see where where it fit into the budget.
So in that case, would the stormwater management plan be added to the discussion of the draft capital expenses? Would that make sense? To add that as part of the
That would make
process?
sense, yeah, yes.
Okay.
So I'm trying to understand what staff is preparing. So it's Monday, and I'm just going to remind everyone that for December 8th, we post this Friday. So I cannot represent that the staff would be able to estimate the cost of a stormwater management plan update for us to post on Friday when we got that question today.
Well, I think, yeah, okay, I understand that, but it should be on this for discussion, and maybe then it could be planned for the next meeting then.
So the issue there is, so the way the budget process works is we'll vote on the draft, the draft budget, and then staff will come back in January with the budget for us to eventually vote on. So we could make a modification, but it gets a little hard, every time you get further and further down the stream, it gets a little harder to make that change. But if it's a single line item, it could be feasible. So I guess the question is, what specifically are you looking to get out of the stormwater management update? Dick?
I don't see this as a enormous project. We're not asking for a stormwater management plan. We're asking for a ballpark number that we can work with as to what it would cost to what is expected to cost. And we have a staff that's quite familiar with this type of thing. We did one in 2017. Probably throw in some inflation
Well,
figures.
did one in 2009.
Yes, and we should have a pretty good ballpark idea of what it would cost. And this is not going to take a whole lot of staff time. I would think that this is the sort of thing you noodle out for about half an hour, and then you come back to the board, and it's going to cost X dollars, and we figure out, you find that amusingly.
And what's
I think estimating an effort like that in 30 minutes is very ambitious to say that a staff member could estimate it in 30 minutes.
Well, we're not asking anyone to estimate in 30 minutes.
He just said it would take 30 minutes. That's exactly what Dick Bolton just
We're asking
said.
for a ballpark figure, a rough figure that gives us an idea. If it's an extraordinarily large amount of money, we drop the subject. If it's a manageable amount of money, we discuss it.
Alan?
But we're just looking for a ballpark figure.
I guess
That's all.
outside of this specific topic, this raises for me a question of our whole budget process that, you know, we unfortunately, we set things up so that a BOC happens to be a week before things are usually due, but it's also not unheard of that we get packet material less than a week before the meeting when staff has an update of something. But if, what I hear being asked for is if we wanted to, I hear that it's not included in the draft proposal or whatever we're calling the budget that we have right now. But if the board wanted to include it, we'd have to know how much it would cost, or at least approximately how much it would cost, so we can allocate some money. When else would we ask for it? If we wait and do it after December 8th, then we're putting staff way further behind the 8 ball to say, to come up with something. So I'm not sure where we do it if we don't do it on the 8th.
So I'm not quite, I just want to make one observation. I don't think we actually need a budget number on the 8th. And we could agree to add this to the budget, let staff work on it over the next month, and then factor that into the budget, and then we would have the number in January. And then we would be voting on it with the actual number. So I think that might be the reasonable approach. Bill?
I think you're going down the right road there, so I don't understand why we would need this as a separate discussion topic on the agenda.
Because we would need
Because
to.
roll that into the existing discussion of.
Yeah, can I follow up on Bill?
Sure.
What I was trying to understand and have clarified right now is whether it now goes under board votes capital allocation and saying this is one of the things we want looked at as opposed to under board discussion.
So here's what I propose. I propose changing the draft capital allocation fixed changeable expenses line from 45 minutes to 55 minutes. And then under that, we note that we'll have votes on a preliminary vote on raising the cap and rate, votes on the 2 grant requests, and a vote on the stormwater management, adding a stormwater management plan. So
Okay.
can I get a motion to do so?
Just a quick point of information, if I could. Plans, studies, and those type of things. Where I come from, those are typically not capital costs. There is not, we don't get any material out of that. It is a study. I thought that was an operational cost. Is
Yeah,
that
it's
correct?
part of the same budget. It's part of the same line item.
Just,
The word capital's in there, the word operating isn't, but
Yeah.
it talks about changeable and
I
unchangeable.
just wanted to make sure I was in the right place.
Fixed
It's-
changeable is also we're
Right.
voting on both the capital budget and the operating
Yes.
budget. Fixed and changeable refers to the operating budget.
Wanted to make sure we were assigning it in the right bucket.
So can I get a motion to
So moved.
take a second on that?
Can we at least vote down the motion that Brian had made about adding the open space study so that we can move on to your motion, sir?
Brian, can you
The
mind
open
withdrawing?
space study? Oh, adding that to it?
No,
Yeah,
withdrawing your motion so we can
yeah,
vote on the
Brian,
motion that.
would you mind withdrawing your motion? No.
Okay, I'll withdraw that, and then we're putting this back in.
Okay, so
I'll withdraw the second.
okay, so the motion on the table is to change. Motion by Ginny, second by what's the second bit?
All right, I'll second.
Okay, so we got a motion on the table, motion by Ginny, second by Bill, to change the draft capital allocation and fixed changeable expenses from 45 minutes to 55 minutes. And in as subtopics, we would vote on the preliminary vote on raising the cap and rate, the vote on the 2 grant requests, and vote on adding the stormwater management plan to the budget.
I thought there was a fourth one. I thought we're going to also approve the amount for capital budget.
And
Because remember there was.
thank you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the
At
11
least those
11
four
million
things,
versus
and
something
approve
else.
the capital budget amount. Yes, thank you. Sherry?
If you're going to talk about stormwater management, please make sure that it says revision
Okay.
or stormwater management plan revision or update. Better,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks.
Update. So that people are clear that there is a plan, and this would be, and it would also give the public an opportunity to weigh in during resident speak out, so it needs to say that specifically. And also to contact village boards and see if people have specific items that they might want to testify or talk about as far as their villages is concerned. That will give us a much better idea in terms of narrowing down what costs might be as we look at the budget.
Good point.
Thank you.
I will assume you'll take that as a friendly amendment.
Oh, absolutely.
So, any further discussion on this motion? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? The motion passes 5-0. So that completes the time for December 8th. I'd like to go on, without objection, I'd like to move on to the December 12th work session.
Want approval of the December 8th?
Can I get approval of the December 8th
So moved.
agenda as amended?
So moved.
Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? The agenda for December 8th passes 5-0.
Okay, January
Next, we
12th.
have the January 12th work session. We have 95 minutes of additional time on this.
Yeah.
The main things on it are the audit committee recommendations regarding the ethics policy. Vicki?
I had one minor tweak to that phrasing. The Director of Audit asked me today to change the language to regarding governance and ethics matters, because it's not only the ethics policy revision. So just a minor tweak in language.
That's fine.
And you leave the word revision or not?
No, it would read, audit committee recommendations to the board of directors regarding governance and ethics matters.
Yeah, just inserting the
Okay,
word
thank you.
governance between regarding and ethics. Okay.
Yeah,
Any objection to that?
no.
Okay. We'll add that.
Okay.
Okay.
Two additional changes. Andy had some suggestion regarding the general plan, maybe 45 minutes on the agenda. Andy, do you want to discuss that? And this is discussion.
Yeah, so the draft general plan is being presented to the planning board this Thursday. And so I think the schedule calls for the planning board to perhaps vote, hold public hearings and vote sometime January, February. And I think CA should at least look at to see if they want to testify on the draft general plan. In order to do that, we need a little analysis of the plan. And then we need a discussion as to what we would, if we would do testimony, and if so, what we do. So I would suggest we add 45 minutes for a discussion on the January 12th, and then a potential vote on the actual meeting in January
Okay.
26th,
26th.
26.
yeah.
Okay. So I gotta,
I think you had some more, I'll second that, more direction in terms of what the staff would be asked to do, Andy.
Right, that would be, we would ask staff to take our approved statement on the general plan, which we did in January 2021, and look at the draft plan and see how it relates. You know, did it meet some of our requirements we laid out, or if not, what's missing, and then I think that can help us with our discussion.
okay. So we got a motion by Ginny to add the
Lakey had a,
I just wanted to clarify, so is that what you meant a moment ago when you said analysis?
yeah,
So it's taking the board statement from January 2021 and comparing what's in the draft plan?
yes,
And where either it aligns or something is
Right.
not lined up?
yeah. Yeah, because that's what the board, that's what the board voted. That's what they wanted to see come out of the draft general plan.
Okay, so we got a motion by Ginny to add 45 minutes to discuss the general plan. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, Brian seconds it. Any further discussion on the motion?
I just got one question about 45 minutes. That seems quite a lot. Do we know what we're going to be discussing?
Sherry?
Yeah, there are lots of different sections within the general plan having to do with housing, having to do with character of neighborhoods, having to do with transportation. So each one of those areas would need to be addressed in terms of what previous board discussions were, and board members, I hope will be able to go in and take a look at that plan and then have additional questions. So it's not just the board vote, but there will certainly be additional questions since the draft has changed since that initial go-round.
Okay.
Imagining this discussion, who would those questions be asked of? Would they be amongst board members, or?
Well, let me ask a question. I thought we were getting somebody in from Howard County to talk to the board about the plan. Is that no longer happening?
We did that at the
Well, yeah.
last meeting.
Amy came in.
Yeah.
Amy Gowan was here and answered questions.
Oh, okay. All right. So the board, the questions that might come up then would be based on what you heard, the plan, and then any other information that we would want to get before preparing testimony.
So the object here is if we're going to provide testimony, we would need to discuss what testimony we would provide. And then draft it and then vote on the draft testimony.
Does Bill
So-
have more? Oh, I'm sorry.
Vicki?
So this might be what Bill is asking, but I'm sitting here with the same question. It's what has happened on easements, and I know it's happened in the past on planning matters. So we have staff, but staff is not writing the Howard County General Plan, right? Howard County is. So it would be necessary, particularly for a robust discussion of the general plan, which happens every 10 years. So it will be a couple hundred pages, for every board member to have thoroughly reviewed the material when they come to the meeting. And so staff, as I understand it from Andy's request, which I think is, a very reasonable, doable request from staff, would be to compare it to the board-approved position statement. So I think the questions makes me a little uncertain as well, because the CA staff can't necessarily interpret or answer what Howard County planning staff means by what's in the document. We only have the document to go off of. So I think it certainly could be advisory in terms of, as you're saying, preparing testimony. But I think the questions, which might be, Bill, what you were asking, I had the same kind of, I'm not quite sure. I think the discussion is reviewing the comparison, everybody comes prepared to discuss, and it's really about what you were saying, Eric, preparing the testimony.
That's where I was going with it. And Jeff, with what you're saying?
Yeah, that
Okay.
sounds good.
So, so we got a motion by Ginny, a second by Bill Bryan to add the 45 minutes to the general plan. Any further discussion on this?
Yeah, Bill, you served on the Board of Appeals and I think the Planning Board?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, and I served the zoning board. So if you have suggestions about, how to conduct this, that would be really helpful.
We can work through that.
So I think we have time. The idea is to get it on the agenda and then reserve a space for it.
At this juncture, broadly speaking, I'll just give you 30 seconds. I think that discussion should be focused that at the end of the 45 minutes, we should be able to have some sort of structure of, this is what we support in the general plan, this is what we oppose in the general plan, and these are the things that we need to work on with the county, and then structure our testimony in that vein, so that
Right,
whoever we send to the planning
Yeah.
board will be able to speak on that.
yeah, so some examples like, well, never mind.
That seems to be
Go on.
what I think, it's one guy's opinion, but
Yeah,
But yeah, basically the object here is to get it on the agenda.
Yeah.
So with that, I'll call a question. All in favor of adding 45 minutes to the general plan? All opposed?
okay, second one?
Motion passes. Okay, so we have 50 minutes left.
Yeah, Brian and Andy, and I'm interested in this, and you were interested in this, is to add a discussion of the tot lots policy, to make sure everybody's familiar with what the current plan, staff plan is. It's not a policy, but the staff plan on tot lots, and then maybe get a chance to hear about from some other areas, whether they have perhaps some different types of approaches to tot lots. And then the board can also listen to residents on this issue. So I was thinking 30 minutes.
Okay. Do you have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Second by Brian. Any discussion on discussing the tot lots?
as a tangential topic, we've got 45 for the general plan, and we're talking about 30 for tot lots. I was hoping that in this agenda, we could keep 15 minutes for anything that is tabled or continued from the December meeting.
What specifically?
We typically find something to table or continue. I was, we find ourselves, it seems to be pretty smart to say, hey, we should have some wiggle room so that when we get to the end of the December meeting and we say, well, we'd like to discuss this next time, we say, at the Board Ops Committee meeting, we decided that we'd fill up the agenda and we had no time to do it in January. So I've learned a few things in 7 months, that's what I'm saying.
You have little faith here.
Well, part of the problem is we only met once in November and once in December, so, and in the past.
We voted on that, though.
I know, I'm saying that leaves less time. And also in, is it January? We met 3 times, I think, last year or the year before. So,
But I will say, even with this, we still have 20 minutes left.
Okay, well then, let us continue the discussion on the tot lots.
I was just going to say, I think Bill's got a good point.
I don't disagree with them.
Put some slush time in there for.
I don't necessarily disagree with them.
okay, and then also, let's see,
So,
the CA,
wait, Lakey.
I had a question on the tot lot policy. The current staff plan, that is straightforward. We have provided that. We can provide that again. The question I have, is this here from other areas? Are you inviting other people to the meeting? I wasn't following what you meant by that.
I would, no, what I was asking is that the staff that deal with this issue perhaps know of other areas where they're doing things differently, and that they would actually give a presentation on what else? Instead of Rascals, somebody else is doing X, or, you know.
Yeah, I guess we're.
Or they're combining and, or they're closing some, or whatever, or turning them into, you know, the staff would actually
I guess
be
what-
the experts in this.
I guess what we're looking for is potential alternatives that the board can consider.
Okay, so you put it for 30 minutes, and you want to review the existing, which I believe the first time it was presented, it was a good hour, but that, I guess, could be shortened. I would ask that before the staff prepare a presentation on what's being done in other areas, the board actually put this as a discussion item and then give us guidance on what you think is working well about the tot lots, what is not working well, because going and saying what other areas are doing should be governed by the strategic direction that the board wants to set around tot lots.
So I think we can certainly generate lots of ideas in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, strategic guidance. So again, what is working, what is not working, so that we can then use staff time to explore answers to those questions.
Understood, Brian?
Yeah, a lot of this grew out of the tot lot in Hickory Ridge. So there's a lot of input from the Hickory Ridge board. So I think maybe taking up some of the ideas, that they had ideas, these ideas were presented to us. So maybe it should be, those ideas should be incorporated or into the discussion.
So what I would suggest is, if this is on the agenda, is to bring those ideas that you have from the Hickory Ridge Village Board and bring those forward in the discussion.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with your strategic notion, Lake. I'd also like to hear at that meeting, it would be helpful to me to hear from the staff as to what the staff feels is working, not working.
Yeah,
Yes.
Right.
We learn as we go along.
Yeah, that's in the presentation as to why we recommended what we did.
Yeah,
So we can recap that.
Any further
because we're
discussion?
talking about $511,000 last year, again this year. So it's a lot of money.
Any further discussion?
Yes, I would say that 30 minutes would not be sufficient, given the robust discussion I've seen on tot lots by this body before.
Okay. would you-
45?
45?
I would suggest lengthening it to Bill's point, so that we don't go over time, that we allocate time accordingly.
So we could make it 45 minutes.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? So we have tot lots for 45 minutes. So we got 5 minutes left. I would probably leave that for,
Give that to Bill for his slush.
give that to the slush fund. Is there anything else that you want
Well-
to add to this agenda?
I was just wondering if the CA votes for village elections would be on this agenda, the 12th of January, the discussion.
So
if we're going to vote, if we were considering voting on the 26th, we should have a presentation on the 12th.
So,
And we should, that should be, is that plenty of time?
and we only have 5 minutes left on this, so
Well,
the question
we
is
can-
how will we trim things
Cut
down?
tot lots to 40, and we got 10 minutes then.
Could do that. So we got a motion to add the CA votes policy for 10 minutes, cutting tot lots to 40.
Just,
Get a second on the motion before we discuss it? Do you have a second on adding these?
Yeah, that's
CA
fine.
votes?
Yeah, I'll
Second
second.
by Brian, okay.
just a point, just as far as timeline moving forward as we approach the election season, I know that in Wild Lake, petitions for elections will go out probably the last week in February or first week in March.
Yep.
And I don't know for a fact, but my gut is that the community association would be reluctant if they needed to change any of their election procedures for blank ballots to do it while the election season is started. So
Yeah, so it would have to be done no later than the end of January.
we need to take, or the first week the first meeting that we have in February.
Well, there's only one meeting in February that we
Oh,
can vote on, so that's
Yes.
at the end of February.
Yes.
Which at that point begins to butt up against when the petitions go out.
So we're in a tight spot for
Sure.
time, but I think that we need to recognize that that is coming up pretty quick.
Yeah.
Getting things done by April isn't going to probably work for a lot of these associations. And there hasn't been any official contact. I don't know this for sure, but that's my hunch.
Yeah, well, if we have this on the agenda, that could be shared with the villages and say, you know, we're looking at the discussion on the 12th and a vote on the 26th, and get feedback from them. And if they say, pass it, but don't implement it for 1 year, we can do that.
Which we're already an hour in here, guys, and I apologize for this, but if this is important, like I think it is, can we move the top lot to February?
So we could.
Yeah, I think that's.
We could move the tot lot, we could move the whole tot lot discussion to February. It's only less time critical than the CA votes policy. So,
I'm sorry that
that's fine.
it rolled out this way.
no, it's totally fine.
Okay.
I just want to make so is it okay?
Take a breath first. We want to get this right.
It's okay. I got it. So.
So
would you
what are we
accept-
adding to
So
Jen?
it's Jenny's motion, so would you accept a friendly amendment to move the tot lots 45 minutes to the February 9th work session?
Oh, sure, if it's bills, yeah.
And then add the CA votes. I guess we'd probably want, how much time do you think we'd need? 20 minutes?
Well, I had 10 minutes, but 20 minutes would probably be a good idea, but I don't think it's going to take that long. But go ahead.
I'd say 20 minutes.
20 minutes sounds right to me, but I'm recalling our discussion last time and thinking if there was anything sticking out that would need extended discussion.
Uh-huh.
Well, keep in mind, if we do this, we now have 30 minutes of slush, so I don't want to call it that, but
With all the financial stuff we have on these agendas, using the word slush doesn't sound like a good idea.
we got 30 minutes of wiggle room.
Well, we would be discussing a draft proposal, though. I mean, it's not like we're making it up.
So, no, focusing, I think 20 minutes sounds correct,
Okay.
in my opinion.
And if we
It's
go-
whether it needs amendments or not is really the
And if we
issue.
go over with this time frame, it's okay. So, any further discussion on moving the tot lots to February, that'll say at 45 minutes, and adding CA votes to this work session for 20 minutes.
Can I make one suggestion that
Sure.
if it's February 9th, we have 50 minutes left, so can we call the tot lot just 50 and instead of, I think we're going to add something for 5 minutes?
What?
Well, I think that's smart.
That's fine.
I mean, it's minor, but then that one's set.
That's
Because
fine.
it's the budget, which obviously will be a very robust discussion.
That's fine. So it's 50 minutes for tot lots in February,
February 9th.
February 9th. Okay, so can I get any further discussion on this? Okay, all in favor?
This is the January 12th agenda.
All in favor of moving the tall lots to February for 15 minutes and adding CA votes for 20 minutes to the January 12th work session? All in favor? All opposed? All abstaining? Motion passes. Right.
I didn't get quick enough to put my hand up.
Okay. Motion passes 5-0.
That was a pass.
You want me to
I
move for
just-
approval of the agenda?
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the January 12th work session?
As
What-
amended.
That's something else.
What? Oh,
I got a question. And we ended up with 30 minutes left over, which, can we use that 30 minutes to a Lake Elkhorn discussion? Because by then we might hear something about the Lake Elkhorn restoration. So I think that should be on the agenda somewhere. So I think it's really important to put that time that we've got left, that 30 minutes, to talk about all the various aspects from the community on that.
I'll second that
Got a motion by Brian to add 30 minutes for Lake Elkhorn.
discussion.
Discussion.
I just want to say, it came to my attention, I'm not sure why I missed it before, that as I understand it, the next step on the flow chart is an approval step, or perhaps disapproval, by some governmental agencies, and I agree, if we don't stay on top of this, we could end up having it slip out from under us if there's things that come up that we want to weigh in on, if we keep pushing it off, so I would approve of that.
Okay, so,
Any further discussion on adding 30 minutes for Lake Elkhorn
Should
discussion?
we narrow that down to Lake Elkhorn discussion, interagency review team?
That's fine?
Well, I think there's probably, I don't think we've really addressed all the questions that are out there from the community. We haven't addressed the questions that we put there. So I think there's a lot more, I mean, there's such a broad subject. I mean, it'd make it a lot easier, I think, if we got all the questions answered that the public have given us, and the questions that I've given, 19 questions, that might be able to, we could focus, then when we get to that 30 minutes, we might be more focused then because we have more information. At the moment, we've got lots of questions, so you can't really plan. I just want the 30 minutes there available, so when we got that information, then we can give really meaningful input. Or not, it might relay our fears of what might happen or not happen, or the community's fears of what might happen or not happen. So I think by having that time there, just start, we got, it's January, so, you know, we're talking about 6 weeks away, a lot could change, and we might, you know, especially if we get the answers to the questions we've asked. So just leave it more open, and then we'll adjust it more, refine the topic at the meeting.
Yeah, so what we'll need ahead of time would be a list of the specific questions that you'd want answered.
well,
Well, they've already been given to staff of those questions.
yeah, what you've sent, maybe if you share with everybody
Okay.
tomorrow or something,
Okay.
you've got a good list of what you want to do.
Leggy?
That has been submitted, and that was answered, that the schedule for the answering the questions, because they are widely varying questions, that is slated for this Wednesday, the schedule to be provided for those questions.
Okay.
That was provided to everybody on the board on our weekly updates.
I didn't quite understand what you're saying this. Could you repeat that for me?
It has been provided previously that because the questions were so widely varying and had different sources for the answers, combined with people's PTO, we have sent via email that we would be providing a schedule of our anticipated answers to the 19 questions this Wednesday.
This Wednesday. Okay, got it. Okay.
So I think then we can just leverage that for this.
Okay, do we
So-
vote on this?
Okay, any further
30
discussion?
minutes?
Adding 30 minutes for Lake Elkhorn for January 12th?
No, all in.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes, all abstaining?
Sorry, I didn't get it.
Motion passes 3-1-1. Can I get so that fills this agenda. Can I get a motion to pass the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Sorry,
All in favor of passing the agenda as amended?
as amended.
All opposed? The agenda for the 12th is passed.
5-0.
Zero.
Okay.
Okay, so now we have the January 26th meeting. I will,
January 12th. The Lake Elkhorn?
Elkhorn, 30 minutes Elkhorn.
One thing I will note on here is that we have a discussion on CA votes, so that should be added to the board votes section.
Yeah, 5 minutes, I've added it,
So can I
under
get
board votes.
Okay, can I get a quick motion to add CA votes to board votes for 5 minutes to the January 26th meeting?
I'll move that.
Okay, second?
I moved it.
Oh, you moved it. You moved it.
He seconded
Bill
it.
seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
I had discussion. So I will go on the record again that CA staff does not recommend that this body vote on how this organization casts votes for the seats that you sit in.
I will actually note that according to our bylaws, the board actually has a role in this process.
Okay.
And I'll say again that the staff believes it's a conflict of interest and is advising the board of such.
Thank you. I'd also like to add the general plan.
We need to vote on this first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, can
Can you repeat them?
we've got a motion to add 5 minutes to vote on the CA votes policy or resolution. To add that to the agenda based on the discussion from the 12th.
Hold on, just for clarification, you said vote on the CA board votes policy or resolution?
No, resolution. It's a resolution.
Oh,
Whatever.
There's no policy right now, but it would be a resolution.
to be clear, this is a resolution that has already been circulated prior, or it would be?
It's a resolution based on what's discussed on the 12th. So the 12th would we would discuss a resolution, make motions amended, crafted on the 12th.
Yeah, we're
And then
discussing,
that would go into a formal vote.
on the
So I'm
12th.
I'm in a hole here, so help me out. Throw me a rope. If it's a resolution, it's non-binding, is that correct?
No, resolutions are binding.
Okay, so
We could
that would
check
have
that
the
out.
full effect of the board.
Yes. So
So
it's
why wouldn't it be a policy?
because I believe our bylaws call for resolutions in this case.
We can check it
So
out.
the bylaws state that, I mentioned it in the resolution that's been circulated, that the bylaws state that the president generally votes on all corporate votes. However, the board has the right to reassign votes, and so by resolution. So it's actually in the bylaws.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's why I've been using the term resolution, because that matches the wording in the bylaws.
All right.
Okay, so given that,
Did we prove that? I don't think so.
okay, so we got a motion by Jenny, second by Bill, I believe.
Yeah.
To add 5 minutes to the CA votes, to vote on the CA votes resolution. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes 3-2. Okay. The other, I just want to carry the
Sure.
votes from the
The
previous.
general plan needs to be on
So
the
the
agenda.
general plan,
20 minutes.
we would need a vote on any testimony that we provide regarding the general plan.
I had 20 minutes, so I don't know.
Do you
What are
think,
we on now?
does that sound about right, 20 minutes?
Yeah, because there may be carryover questions from the discussion that need to be ironed out.
Can I get a motion to?
So moved. Oh.
Okay. So that's 20
Motion
minutes.
to what?
To add a vote on the general plan for 20 minutes to the January 26th.
So moved.
General plan testimony.
Testimony, yes.
We need this.
Testimony, yes, yes. General plan testimony.
Second that.
Thank you. Any discussion on it?
Can I ask a quick point of information for village elections? What was the time allocation, 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the general plan? Agenda item.
General plan testimony.
Yes, testimony. Whenever I say general plan, just add the word testimony, just by default.
Got it?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. General plan is testimony.
Thank you.
Per bill.
General testimony.
Is that for 20 minutes?
Another one.
Okay.
Well, it's more whether we need to add under board discussion, continuation of the board discussion on tot lots, whether we
we wouldn't-
feel we had enough on the 12th.
Well, now the toilets are
That makes
shifted
it
in February, so that got shifted.
Right. Right.
Dick?
I would like to suggest that under board votes, we take care of the ethics code and the ethics enforcement policy. We will have talked about it at the previous meeting, and I think it's time to,
So the issue I see there is the previous meeting has the audit committee recommendations for the board of directors. So that just has the audit committee recommendations. It doesn't actually have a policy discussion. The
well,
audit
I'm
committee
not sure what, this whole, this audit committee recommendation, I think is the first I've heard of it. I don't know what they're planning to discuss or contribute or whatever. I'm looking forward to hearing it. But we've been batting this thing around and around and around. I think it's time to.
So
get some
what
closure.
I would recommend here, so I was on the last audit committee where they were discussing the recommendations. What might be useful here is to have the audit committee in their recommendations suggest what the ethics policy and enforcement guidelines and bring that suggestion to the board.
Yeah.
In which case that could be done as part of the January 12th agenda item, and then we could vote on those recommendations.
Yes, now, there are two pieces, remember. There is an enforcement policy, which I think is something the audit committee should certainly
Yes.
weigh in on. And the other is the code itself.
Yes.
Which is pretty much ready to roll. We're waiting for some input from Wes. He was going to give us a couple of, I don't know, a few lines of,
So given the way this is structured, I would recommend that the code and the enforcement piece be funneled through the audit committee to get their take on it and have them basically provide feedback and then provide recommendations back to the board.
well, yes, and then they could do that on January 12th.
Well, that would be done January 12th, yes.
Yeah,
That's my
so we can
recommendation.
have the code and
Yes.
the enforcement policy. Fine, let's do
Okay.
that.
Okay. Did you have a comment, Bill?
I was just going to say that I think that in this meeting, it would be best to vote to adopt the recommendations
Well,
on governance and ethics.
yeah, keep in mind at this meeting, the amendments can and probably will happen. So,
Yeah.
Do you mean January 12th, when we hear it?
12th would be when it's introduced, right? And then-
so yeah, we get the we get
get the vote.
we get back the key thing is that the recommendations would have to in part take the form of the policy and the enforcement piece. If it's just sort of random recommendations, then there's not much you can do with it. But if it takes the form of a policy that the board can vote on, and the enforcement policy that we can vote on,
I would,
then we could.
I don't know if we'll have enough time in between the two of those. There's some, that, I will say, without giving away much of the ghost here, that would be problematic. That's all I'm going to say.
Problematic.
Yes.
But at the same time, we could.
Alan,
Alan?
Is the audit committee planning on weighing in on this particular proposals for ethics policies that we have, or is the audit committee weighing in based on their study of ethics complaints with some recommendations? I'm not clear.
So keep in mind,
That's a good question.
So keep in mind, this is an open meeting, so I think a lot of that can't actually be.
I'm not asking about the specifics, I'm just asking which is that their source of their, or is it both?
But I believe.
I think it's a good question.
And Andy and Bill, you might want to correct me, but I believe one of the main topics was certainly the enforcement approach and how we handle that. So that was certainly something that at the last meeting we discussed in great detail. the code itself was less discussed, but I think there was enough discussion there to,
There were going to be recommendations on that
yeah.
part too.
What I would say is based on work that the audit committee did, a number of recommendations associated with ethics and governance will be presented in January.
But the key thing, I think, is to make sure that when we vote on the audit committee recommendations, that we have, if, the best case would be to actually vote on as part of those recommendations, vote on both policies. If, at the very least, we need a definite path forward to get to that point. So Licky?
I would clarify that, at least my understanding from the audit committee and being part of that, is that all that is in front of them for recommendations is what was just described. The audit committee has not been asked to review any draft policies that have been developed by the general counsel or individual board members. So asking the audit committee to do that, they have a meeting next week, and then they meet quarterly. So asking them to add an evaluation of all of the policy and have that done by January 12th, I think might be too aggressive, at least based on their normal meeting schedule.
Sounds good to me.
Jenny?
Yeah, I'm having the same concern that Lakey's having. I would like to just hear what the audit committee has to say. I don't know when we'd be ready to vote on that, because I think we have to look at what's being proposed by the ethics work you've been doing, and then see where there's conflict or agreement. So I don't see voting on January 26th, quite frankly.
So I've got a question for.
But I don't think it has to go to the audit committee.
So
I think we can.
I actually do have a question for Bill and Andy. So what's coming out of the audit committee? Is this actually something that we would even need to vote on, or is it just basically, here's your
Information,
recommendations?
I would say that the audit committee is going to come and present a series of recommendations which they would like the board to adopt.
Okay.
And it would govern future changes to any policies that might come up.
So if we adopt recommendations,
Right.
How does
And
that
we'd have to
affect-
make sure that
how does that affect policy?
and then when we go to revise the policies, they have to be in conformance, the revisions have to be in conformance with the recommendations that the board of directors adopted.
Okay.
I don't get it.
So if we, if we say you meet 3 times a month, then any policy changes would have to follow that guidance.
Sherry?
Yeah, except that a recommendation does not require a change in policy.
No, it doesn't require.
And it doesn't, so a recommendation is just a recommendation, and that doesn't mean that a policy that follows must follow those recommendations. The recommendations can be made and are still up for discussion as far as the creation of a policy is concerned.
Right, that is true, right, when the policies actually come up. But what you're doing is giving guidance.
Right, and I think that that's very important
Right.
to translate what has come from other sources.
Yep.
So that it's presented, it's debated, it's recognized that this is something that needs to be taken into account, but it doesn't trump a policy. I just want to make sure that it's very clear that a recommendation is a recommendation, and this is where we get into a lot of difficulty. A policy trumps a recommendation doesn't trump a policy.
yeah.
That's all.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the question I have is, do we vote on recommendations? I mean,
No,
recommendations is
no.
a recommendation.
So we vote on whether we accept the recommendation.
Yeah, and you accept the recommendations and give a sense of what the board wants. Because that's the important thing, is to know that, yeah, the board supports recommendations 1, 2, and 3, but doesn't like 4 and 5.
Right.
Because without that guidance,
Okay.
we're back discussing.
So in that case, could I get 20 minutes to add a board vote for the audit committee recommendations
When?
for January 26th?
No.
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 We'd already thought.
I'm
I'm
against.
tired of all the foot dragging
Yeah.
I've been seeing on this. And it's just, it just seems that if something comes up, every meeting to delay a very simple vote. And the vote is, and there is a draft ethics code that Andy and I have written, that Wes has reviewed, that we are waiting, the only piece that's left in it is there's a little bit of verbiage where Wes wanted to use the actual language in state law as opposed to a summary of it. I have been waiting for 2 weeks to get that stuff to plug it in, and that is it. It's ready. It is ready it's ready to be voted on.
So the
And as for the how it would be enforced, that is a separate item, which I don't know that there's been any real consensus on yet. And that's another piece. But I'd like to get the code off the to be someplace in the clouds and give the board an opportunity to accept or reject it, or accept it with amendments.
So the point of order, the issue here is that in order to put the code as a vote on this agenda, there needs to be a prior discussion on that code.
And that would be the previous meeting.
That would be on the 12th, but the problem is I don't see it on the agenda for the 12th currently.
Well, at the time, we're listening to what the audit committee has to say. That would be a time to, this would be part of that discussion.
We would have to make that a separate agenda item on the 12th if you want that.
I would, this is getting very frustrating.
I realize that.
And I would, we can fix it right now, or I can make an amendment at that meeting to add it to the agenda, but I think we could solve this right now by saying that when the audit committee presents whatever comments or recommendations they have, that the existing draft, ready to roll ethics code is part of that discussion. If they look at the ethics code and they have any problems with it, let us know at that time. I don't think they're going to have any problems with it, except that it's not the one that Wes presented back in March.
Yeah. Okay. What I would prefer is that we hear from the audit committee in January, like it's planned, January 12th. We get a chance to, as Shari said, it's recommendations. So we got a chance to really look at it, compare it to the code, figure out what changes we may need to that code document or not that would improve it from the audit committee report. And then we just deal with the code. And I would suggest that be more in February. I don't think we can handle
Why
it.
in February?
Because I really want to get a chance to listen to the audit committee, hear what they have to say. But I don't see voting on the audit committee
You're putting it off for another month.
Well, I want to.
Time out. So there's one problem with February is that the February time's not built.
Well, and it may
So I
be
just want
March.
so then it would have to go to March.
I really want to listen to that, and I don't think we should be voting on recommendations. I think that needs to be incorporated as appropriate into what you've drafted, the code, and I think we need time for that. Go get him, Andy.
Thank you. It's easy for me. Thank you.
Yeah, and less embarrassing than. So, I mean, that's,
I just, okay,
I don't want to be
this thing
forced
has
to.
been floating. People have had a chance
know.
to read it again and again and again. Let's get this done.
I get
Agree.
it, but from what I understand that it's gone through another revision between you
It-
and
it-
Andy.
It's had a couple of minor changes. Numbers have been added to it. That was the key change. There were some recommendations that Andy put in, which I think everybody's seen at this point. This thing has been floating around. Everybody's had a chance to read it multiple times. Let's get it voted on.
So if that's the case, I don't see why the audit committee can't recommend pushing it forward. I mean, Bill?
The audit committee has not looked at this.
Yeah.
So the audit committee is not going to, well, I can't speak for the entire committee, but as a member, I don't believe that there will be any comment on a policy that has not been looked at by the committee. That just doesn't make sense.
So the
Yeah.
issue, the way I see it, I get it. There's two issues that we need to be very cognizant of. The first issue is that if we're going to vote on a major policy, generally there's a 3 reading rule. Given how much we've discussed, I think we can safely say that there's been 1 reading. However, that given that given that we're setting up and say, okay, this is the draft that we're going to actually look at, because in the previous meetings we actually were considering with 3 drafts in front of us, and now we'd be whittling it down to 1 draft. That draft deserves a discussion before we vote on it. I think that's fair, and that's in compliance with our 3 reading rules for passing major policy. So we to stick this on this agenda without having a discussion on the actual policy on the 12th is a problem, in my opinion. The other issue is time. We don't have any additional time on the 12th unless we go back and modify it. So I don't see the time to add it based on what we've got on the 12th, unless something else can be moved.
Alan had a
Alan?
comment. Then I have a comment.
Nick?
I see this going into February, going into March, going into April, as we drag our feet, and people keep coming up with more excuses to not address a problem we've had for 6 years. And I want to get it done. And I don't see any reason why, this should go to the audit committee in the first place anyway.
I agree.
And
I agree.
I would just say that let's go back to I don't know what the audit committee is presenting on governance or whatever, but let's carve out some time in there to address the ethics code.
So, Andy, Bill, I'll ask you this question. I don't want to necessarily ask for a preview, but I'm going to ask for a preview anyway. Of the audit committee recommendations, do you see any of those recommendations as pertaining to that would potentially impact the ethics code?
Didn't Bill just say they didn't talk about it?
They didn't talk about the policy, but they talked about recommendations. Would any of those recommendations impact our ethics code?
I
mean,
don't know, because I don't have the recommendations in
Yeah, I
front of
realize
me.
that.
mean, that's
I
the
realize it's an
problem.
impossible
And
question.
like, oh.
Well, I can
don't
answer that
remember.
Yes.
question. The one thing they recommended regarding the code was that we have a separate code.
Andy's got the floor.
No, I was going to say, look, the audit committee is the chair of the audit committee is putting in a lot of work into producing the recommendations, and I think many of you know what they're based on, okay, and presenting them officially to the board so that we can talk about it, at a work session and get board feedback to those recommendations. And I think it's going to take about 45 minutes because, one, you're going to have to let.
We're not debating that. We already passed that.
And we really haven't compared the recommendations to any of the policies. I mean, the audit committee really hasn't done that.
No, not asking you to do that. Basically, the question is, would a recommendation potentially impact the ethics code? And-
Yes, it is possible
and that's where I'm
a
going.
recommendation.
I think the board, the audit committee recommendations are broad and they're fundamental, and they will affect many policies, of which one of them may be ethics.
And
That's a good way of putting it.
and
Okay.
That's about the only way.
We've all seen the recommendations.
they haven't been drafted.
Well, the open meeting version was discussed at the audit committee.
Yes.
And it's no secret that one recommendation that was made was that we have a separate code. That was one of the recommendations. This is the separate code that the audit committee recommended, or was recommended by the people who, whatever. So my thinking, I think the thing that is going to require some discussion, where there is some controversy, has to do with the enforcement piece, which is not the code. The enforcement piece is a policy, and that might drag out for years. But I just want to get the code done, and so we can put that away and have it, and then figure out how to enforce it.
I sure hope that doesn't drag up for years.
Yeah,
Well, it has been dragging out.
Mr. Chair, what is the motion on the floor?
We don't have a motion on the floor.
not that I'm aware of.
As far as I can tell, right now, there is no motion on the floor. Because, actually, there is a motion on the floor. There's a motion to add 20 minutes for accepting the audit committee recommendations to board votes for the January 26th agenda item.
To that point, I'd like to make one point of discussion. I think that would be an important thing to do, because if you look backwards at it, if the recommendations are presented at the first meeting in January and there is no action taken, months hence, people will say, well, the recommendations were presented but no action was taken, and then they lose their value. We adopt and we say we accept the recommendations. It's kind of right for.
I sense there's agreement, so I'll call a question. All in favor of adding 20 minutes to vote on adopting the audit committee recommendations? All opposed?
No,
I was for, sorry.
What?
Second.
opposed.
Opposed? Bill, how'd you vote?
My vote was for.
Okay, so the motion passes 4-1. So we'll add 20 minutes to vote on the audit committee recommendations. So we've had, so that we've added 45 minutes so far out of 63. Any additional things that we want to add to this meeting?
General plan, 20 minutes, CA vote on elections, 5, and the audit committee recommendations, 20.
Yeah, I've got general plan, CA votes, audit committee recommendations. So we've got
45.
about 20 minutes left, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
Can I suggest a vote on the ethics policy, on the ethics code, excuse me?
So again, the issue is, I believe that's going to violate the 3 reading rule.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a discussion on it
So
beforehand.
then I recommend to the committee that we have a discussion, 20-minute discussion of the ethics code.
Okay, we can do that.
I have a clarification. When we talk about 3 readings, I mean, is it 3 readings of a particular motion, or is it 3 discussions of a topic? God knows we've had way more than 3, and some very specific discussions on some of the language, and I'm not sure.
So here's the way
Let's see, we have three.
here's the way I interpret it. There has to be 3 readings. Granted, it can change, and we certainly have had more than enough readings on this from a pure numerical standpoint. But my general interpretation of the spirit of the rule is to make sure that everyone has a chance to. We have a chance to discuss a major policy. People have a chance to think about it, and then we have a chance to discuss and vote 2 weeks later. So most things require 2 readings. Major policies require 3 readings. Given that we've had so much discussion, I'd say the first meeting's been more than met. But in the spirit of the rule, I think it's fair that if we're going to be presenting the specific text that we've have not actually looked at.
Right.
Because we're not, again, you're splicing together stuff that's been in previous, been on previous meeting agendas. It's not clear how that's spliced. I think it's important for there to see that splicing, be able to discuss that splicing, be able to make recommendations to that splicing, and then come back, think about it, and then vote on it. So having that time to look at it and vote is important. And also, we also should consider the fact that we have a new member on the board who may not have seen much of this. So I think it's important that Lynn can see the text ahead of time, be able to discuss it in a meeting, and then take the time to reflect and vote. So that it's less about the mechanisms, what constitutes a reading, and more about the spirit that I'm really concerned with. And I think the spirit requires us to discuss it, discuss what the final proposed text looks like, discuss any changes that we want to make to that final proposed text, and then vote on it. So given that, I think we do have time to add 20 minutes to discuss it under board discussion.
On the 26th?
On the 26th, and then that could be teed up for a future vote.
Yeah.
But
Is there a committee member that would like to make that motion?
that's what I'm suggesting. Can I get a motion to add? I think we've got 18 minutes left, so 18 minutes to discuss the draft ethics policy, draft ethics code. Anyone?
I would, yes, so moved.
Okay. Can I get a second? Can I get a second on that?
Dub, 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 dub.
A second.
Wait for a second.
Going a second to discuss the
Discuss it?
Just discuss the ethics code on the 26th.
Okay.
Okay. Got a second on that. Any discussion on it? Any discussion on whether at all on it?
Well,
Okay.
I just think your points are very valid in terms of, I don't think any of us have seen whatever's coming out, the new document. Maybe it hasn't changed much, but we all need to see that, not just a new board member. And the public has to see that. So we can't be voting right away. It's,
It's not a vote, it's discussion.
Discussion.
It's just discussion.
Yeah, I know, but I'm trying to say that we need time to look at it, so does the public, in terms of what is it now?
Are you agreeing or disagreeing?
I'm agreeing, would have preferred it in February, but,
I think it's actually better here because
okay,
February's
okay,
booked.
okay.
Any other discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? We will add 18 minutes to discuss the ethics policy. Code
3 to 2.
3 to 2 for board discussion. Can I get a motion to move the agenda?
As amended?
As amended.
Move as amended.
Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Motion passes 4-1. And this agenda is so moved.
Amen.
Okay.
February 9th.
We got February 9th. We already moved to move the tot lots for 15 minutes on February 9th.
The board did.
There's only board discussion.
Motion to approve the February 9th agenda.
Can I get a second on that with the amended tot lots for 15 minutes?
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion, you're opposed?
No, my hand was up
Oh,
for 4.
oh, okay. Well, oh, okay.
How much time?
There's 50 minutes for the tot lots. The motion for February 9th passes. That brings us to February 23rd. We got 63 minutes.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry. February 9th, there's nothing else that we
filled
have
it.
time for, or?
We had 15 minutes, and we filled it with 50 minutes of tot lots.
Well, the only other subject I had, maybe we could put it under tot lots, was perhaps we need to be looking at the grant policy that previous board passed and see if that still is applicable, and just see if it needs any changes, and that would allow us, if we discussed it on February 9th, to make any amendments, if needed, on February 23rd.
So you want to revise the,
And that would be 10 minutes. Well, and everybody would have to read the grant policy and really see if you're satisfied with it or it needs any tweaking
so you're moving to revise the,
under work session.
so you take,
Review CA's grant policy
under the work session?
under work session topics, 10 minutes.
We just
I'm
voted on-
sorry, what?
Yeah, we approved it.
We just approved the agenda.
We did?
Yes.
Yes.
You voted for it.
I thought I was voting for tot lots, the 15 minutes.
No, you,
Nope.
no, we voted to approve the agenda for
The
50
motion was
minutes.
to approve the whole agenda and it passed.
Okay,
Okay.
well, I still think we need to look at it, but okay.
We can look at them, we could, I mean, we can always revise the agenda if you want to go back. Okay.
Well, we could
Relook-
reconsider the
you can-
vote by which the,
Do you want to reconsider the vote?
I'll see if anybody's interested. A move to reconsider the vote by which the agenda February 9th was approved.
To take into account the grants policy?
To take into account, right, a review of the grant policy, which would be based on, we have to individually really do our homework there and see if there's a need.
Is there any interest in reconsidering?
Guess not?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
That brings us to the February 23rd meeting. We've got 63 minutes. The only thing added is tot lots, so I would want to add probably 20 minutes to discuss a vote on tot lot policy.
Okay, so that would,
Any
Discussion.
discussion?
So I have, I guess, again, a clarification on that, because what I suggested was we would be getting feedback from the board on what's working and what's not, to then go explore other areas to come back. So I'm not clear what you would be voting on.
So we could be voting on, so keep in mind, this is sort of in line with the budget. So, and we're voting on we're voting on the budget here. So if we wanted to suggest a strategy to, say, change the strategy of how we're renovating tot lots, it would make sense to vote on that strategy while also voting on the budget that allocates money to the tot lots. That make sense? So if we had.
So we're not looking for other areas and what you were saying earlier.
Well, we could consider other areas. There's lots of things we could consider.
So what my notes were from when we were allocating the 50 minutes was that we would present what is the existing staff plan, which in that considers our pace of repair, how we do inspections, why we came up with the plan that we did. So we would do that. And then my notes say, discuss what's working and what's not from the board, that would then give us guidance on what we go explore as other options. So we would not be presenting other options, because the board would need to be giving us strategic guidance on what it is you want the tot lots to be accomplishing that they aren't, or do they have a different role, or is there not 171 of them?
Wouldn't we be voting on that?
So we wouldn't have the outside research for the alternatives. So I'm just confirming that's now not a component. Now you're just going to be reallocating the budget, which obviously is your prerogative.
We're already
Right, that's
voting on the budget anyway.
correct. I'm just making sure I'm clear on what the staff is preparing.
Yeah, so again, we will have discussed, we were to discuss different tot lot strategies. So are you suggesting that we would need a second meeting to discuss alternatives to the tot lot strategies here and then vote on those alternatives in a future meeting? You're proposing?
Yeah, I don't see, so just keeping in mind that there'd be a week to get that work done. So there's no way that we could do any, reasonable work product in a week that, depending on
Yeah, we
how
would not
varied
have
the board
alternate ready.
guidance might be or ideas.
That's why I'm trying to understand what the vote itself is, because to your point, the allocation of the budget, I mean, that's inside the budget vote.
That's inside the budget vote. But there should be, we've got one strategy for tot lots right now. That'll be presented on the 9th. If we want to make adjustments to that strategy, we would vote on that, I assume.
So where I'm confused is maybe now we're doing something different on the 9th. So what I had written from when we discussed it, when it was back in January, was that we would be presenting what we have today, what's in place today, and then we would have board discussion that would give us strategic guidance on what you might want different, so we then go explore other alternatives, which might be in other places, might be other manufacturers, might be other kinds of options. But in order to do that, we would not, to Susan's point, be able to turn it around in a week, but more importantly, that would take us a little bit of time to then report back to the board. So my thought was, why would you be voting on it at the very next meeting? Because we wouldn't be able to present the alternatives.
Okay, so what would you?
If that's the goal.
What would you propose as a strategy for handling this?
Well, I would propose it be in the next, if you want it to
Exactly.
impact a budget cycle, it needs to be the next one. I mean, this is way too late to make strategic decisions on a major capital asset. I think that this would be something that needs to be done over several meetings to do it well, and then it impacts the FY25 budget.
And that's kind of the question I keep coming back to. If the goal is to take what we have today, which was presented to the board in July of 2021 for the first, in summary, if the goal is to have it be a completely different process, then we can present that in one meeting, and then the board, without any other outside information, formulate a completely different budget approach. So when we were talking about it in January, it wasn't about the budget. It was about the tot lot policy. And so it had no connection to the budget. You just connected it to the budget in your comments, which is where part of my confusion is. If we're presenting what we're doing, we're getting board feedback on what you'd like to see, what you want to explore, what you think is a priority from the community, then we go explore those alternatives, we look at best practices, we would then come back at a later meeting, present that information, it would probably solicit more discussion, and then we would want to say, wow, that would really change the way we do the budget process or the way we do repair. I think there's a lot of elements that would need to be put in place to operationalize a strategy for a budget. So I think what I thought I understood in January was, let's understand what we're doing in tot lots, and then have a discussion about what you want to see differently. What is the feedback you're hearing that you want to see differently? I mean, one tot lot in Hickory Ridge does not represent 171 across all of Columbia.
I certainly agree, but also any discussion on tot lots or changing our strategy is inherently tied to the budget, because tot lots cost money. So we have to be cognizant of the fact that whatever strategy changes we make regarding how we handle tot lots is implicitly a budget decision.
Right, but it's not necessarily
Not necessarily
this
this,
budget
not necessarily this
decision.
budget,
Right, that's what
but it is.
not necessarily
But I'm saying it inherently affects a budget down the road, perhaps.
will affect the future budget, but it's just that right now the budget is built under the current strategy.
Yes, which I'll point out we never voted on.
But to change that now, we're going to vote next week on the capital budget
Yes.
numbers,
Yeah,
Maybe we
I
can
realize
get
that.
something back
plus
from
all the
the
maintenance
agencies.
costs. I mean,
Yeah,
it can
I realize that.
right.
But what I'm what I'm actually, I guess what I'm looking for is, can we, developing
Agencies should have
a
some.
strategy, a vision for how we want the tot lots to evolve going forward. That's, because right now, we've got a policy that basically says every tot lot gets a rascal unless one village lobbies us hard enough, in which case they might get something different. But what I'd like to see is a more of a global strategy on how we approach the tot lots as a complete system for all of Columbia. And granted, I don't foresee getting to that point in a week. That's obviously not feasible. But I also want to make sure that we don't have this topic dropped. So if we're discussing the current policy on the current strategy on the 9th, perhaps what we could do on the 23rd is discuss alternatives. Would that make sense?
We would not be able to research, because again, we would be doing that in a
Not
week.
necessarily specific alternatives, but we could discuss things like strategic alternatives, like ages. Like right now, our tot lot policy is geared towards 2 to 5-year-olds, and in reality, it's really geared towards 2 to 3-year-olds. So if that's the
So I think what would be really, sorry to interrupt, but I think what would be really helpful from the board, and I'll speak, and Susan, you can weigh in if you want to weigh in, or board members that were here. The way it was explained to me is that the way that the current tot lot plan got put together was that, if you can imagine, because I can't, every tot lot would come to the board. Every single tot lot. Every single tot lot.
I would
So that
be an
was
adventure.
not a really prudent use of board time. And so the idea was how many could be, what was the pace of repair, how many were normally repaired in a year, what was the capital kind of set aside that we could do in order to do that and keep the safety maintenance going, all of those component pieces. So that's what the plan represents. The board's guidance was not what you were saying, right? Which is we want to have a strategic framework of different types of playgrounds, and because we've all had the discussion, there's probably 10 to 12. So all of that kind of strategic guidance, that's what we could use from the board. That's what we need from the board. We want the tot lot, we want this kind of amenity in Columbia.
Yes.
And that means that we're going to have to change the way we do 171 tot lots today, but this is a greater priority. The staff would then explore the options, put forward alternatives, talk about the trade-offs, and have a budget cost associated with it. All of that would ultimately be operationalized. So that is all within our capacity that we can do. The issue is the board's role is to give us the strategy of what are the priorities of what you want to accomplish. So we wouldn't need to turn around in a week and give you alternatives, because you would actually need to tell us what your priorities are.
That's where I'm going. So what
Okay.
I would want to do is have a discussion, and would we need to vote on it here, or?
No, we would just need guidance from
Okay.
the board.
So, okay, so what I would like is a discussion to discuss the board's tot lot priorities, add that to board discussion for the 23rd, and I believe, what do we have left on the agenda for this? I think we got all 63 minutes. We didn't add anything else to it.
Eric,
Yeah.
what it sounds like, what you want to do is put something in something like a board discussion on strategic directions
Yes.
for tot lots.
Yes, that's.
Yeah,
that's-
so that we are not going to sit there
And talk about
and
a tot
argue about.
No, we're not doing
We're
that.
going to do, where do we think the tot lots filled in, and
What needs do they fill?
Yes,
What needs,
right.
what needs, basically, what needs do they currently fill? What needs are lacking? What needs are missing? What are
so
the-
let's
what
do
are the-
strategic
that-
direction.
That's where the board needs to operate, is the strategic level, shall we?
Yeah, so in line with that, can we move away from tot lots and just say play areas?
Yes, we can say play areas.
So that takes us away from the policy issue, that takes us away from that, and we're looking more holistically at
Actually,
strategy.
I'd go further and say recreational areas.
Just say play areas.
Okay, play areas.
Yeah, people will then understand, it connects to the previous discussion. And it continues.
So we'll call it strategic direction on play areas.
I like that, yeah.
And we've got 63 minutes, so with 30 minutes.
So you should do 45.
45
I mean,
Sounds good.
if we're going to really do strategic direction,
Okay, so can I get a motion to add 45 minutes to discuss the strategic direction of CA's player areas?
So moved.
Okay, a second on that?
I second it.
Any further discussion on it?
I would just say that when we look at anything to do with open space, we should start thinking about the whole concept of open space. And I think, and that's where the 2017 open space plan came in. And I think there was also, Kiara had presented an idea for Columbia open space. So it's a new visualizing for us. I think maybe there's a broader discussion to be had on the whole concept of open space. Okay. We've got 2 open space plans, so we ought to make policies to move forward on some of those good ideas.
I don't know if that because there are many varied types of open space. This is a very specific, constructed environment within open space. This is not a managed woodlands discussion.
Yeah, I agree there. I think if we try to discuss open space overall, it's too broad a topic. As a singular topic, it's huge. So making sure that we got it narrowed down appropriately, I think is important.
I would like to say that when we started talking about the top lot, it did go into a lot more. It's a lot more complicated than that, and that's what staff told us. All the different aspects that we had to take into consideration, which was watershed and lots of.
Yeah, you got to take into account. You got to take into account other open space issues. But I wouldn't want to have a discussion on all of CA's open space. It would be way too broad. We would be here all day. So given that, we've got a motion to add 45 minutes to discuss the strategic direction of CA's play areas. I'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Passes 5-0. Can I get a motion to move the agenda?
So moved as amended.
Was really time.
Oh, whoops, sorry.
I would like to make a suggestion. This could be a good time to make the vote on the ethics code. We will have discussed it 3 times.
Well, what I was
Okay,
going to say is in March, if you want to continue that discussion.
We would have discussed it on.
That would mean the next.
Yes, you're right. We would have discussed it on the January meeting.
January 26th, right?
Yes, we would have discussed it on the January 26th meeting.
That would be a month
But this,
So,
that would be.
can I get a motion to vote on the ethics code for the February 23rd?
The time?
It would be 18 minutes.
So moved.
Get a second on that? Second. So you got a vote. This would be a vote on the ethics code for 18 minutes. Any discussion on adding the vote for the ethics code for 18 minutes for this meeting? Vicki?
I would echo what was said earlier, that the version, whatever it is going to be when it's introduced, it will be the first time that one is introduced.
No, this would have been introduced. On the 26th for 18 minutes. We already had that.
Right.
Yes.
So what I was going to say is it's not the 3 meeting. I was just going to echo that.
This would be, we would have introduced it on the 26th. We would have, then we'd be voting on the 23rd. I think we've had plenty of discussion prior to that. If someone wants to object to the 3 meeting rule.
So I'm just indicating that the prior discussion this fiscal year, not last, was not around substantive issues. So I'm just pointing that out because you made a point, however long ago now, that the 3 meeting rule needed to be in place, and that I just wanted to point that out.
Okay. So noted. So again, like we did last time, we could we could vote to suspend and go to a 2-meeting rule if, but we discussed the ethics policy.
Code.
But we've discussed the ethics code at least a couple of times, and we've discussed it in some degree in prior meetings that and if someone wants to object to it, they could object to the fact that this is the second time through, and then we could vote on whether or not to suspend the 3-meeting rule for a major policy.
Can I point out that quite often with the three-reading rule, the thing that is originally proposed gets modified in
Yes.
each meeting. And so the final document that gets voted on is not the initial document. The initial document was the one that was proposed several months ago
Yes.
and was on the agenda, was on the, in the packet that has been seen. There have been conversations about it, and it has minor revisions to it. It has been thoroughly discussed. It's not a question of suspending the 3-meeting rule.
I agree. Actually, I think Andy?
Just real quick, if you do take a vote, we're still with your understanding, right, that none of this goes into effect until all of the ethics policies are revised. Remember, because we got into
So
this where...
we would, that would be part of the motion.
Right, you're right. We can't approve
We're
just
not-
one change and then...
That would be part of the motion.
Right, okay.
But we're not crafting the motion here.
No, I know, but just so...
Yes, we should note that would be part of the motion.
Right, because it's...
But this is just getting the motion on, getting the topic on the agenda for a vote. I don't want to necessarily try to craft the motion right now. Any further discussion on the ethics policy?
Code,
And
Ginny just left the room. I'd like to hold the vote when she gets back.
yes, I will hear any further discussion on adding the code until Ginny gets back.
I have a concern that there may be need for additional materials to be included in the code between January and February, and I don't know if that can get done in that timeline.
Well, there'd be additional materials that would be potentially suggested by the audit committee. There'd be a thorough discussion on the 26th. You got a whole month. There should be no reason why there isn't enough time. This has been hashed to death and hashed to death. And you got a month, like usually where we have 2 weeks here, you have an entire month to discuss it. I don't think that's an issue.
I'm cognizant of what the timeline is and the number of days between.
Yeah,
I just want to voice my concern.
I get you. I get you. I don't think it's necessarily going to be an issue. You have a comment?
Yeah, quick one. I'm sorry if you covered this, but about a year ago, the previous chair, when asked why there isn't a third reading on something, said the chair is the one that decides. Maybe that's in policy, whether it's 2 discussions or 3. I had asked why we weren't doing a third on, I forget what issue. So that was the answer I got last year.
I think it's been noted.
I don't know what's legal or not.
But I think it's been noted that we've certainly had
Yeah, no, I
plenty of
just wanted to add that, yeah.
I just want to make sure that there are 2 meetings where we discuss what the code is and then vote on what the code is, and it's pretty clear. So I will call the question. All in favor of adding the vote on the ethics code for 18 minutes for February 23rd? All opposed? Motion passes 3-2. I'd like to move the agenda. Can I get a motion to move the agenda?
So moved,
Can I get a second
as
on that?
amended.
Second.
All in favor of moving the agenda? All opposed? Motion passes 4-1. Any administrative items?
Who seconded that, please?
What?
Who seconded that motion? I'm trying to help Janet with the notes.
Oh, the motion to move the agenda. I think
I moved it, and
Brian seconded.
Right, thank
Brian
you.
seconded.
Any administrative items? Nope. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So,
Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Any objections to adjourning?
do you give me the
Meeting is
second?
adjourned.
Second.
Thank you.
Sure enough.